Today, ladies and gents, we're going to have a bit of fun. Lewis Hamilton, fresh off a 6th world title. Crikey. Way back in 2007, I think the majority of us expected this kid to be good. But to be this good, I'm not too sure many of us in our wildest dreams would have imagined seeing Lewis Hamilton, only 13 seasons later, picking up a 6th world title, especially at the end of his McLaren days. However, he's done it. The move to Mercedes that was so heavily criticised, he was slammed for it. Blimey, that's paid off big time. And all bias aside, fair play to him. I'm not Lewis Hamilton's biggest fan, I'm not his biggest hater, but I've got to respect the work he's put in, the gamble he took with Niki Lauda to go to Mercedes, and what is ultimately a career that is slowly becoming one of the best of all time. So, I'm doing it. I'm being brave. Today, ladies and gents, we are discussing, I can't quite believe I'm doing this, is Lewis Hamilton the greatest of all time? This is a highly opinionated video, something I don't tend to shy away from very often, but it's one that I've been thinking about doing all season long, but now we're at 6 championships. Now he's on the brink of catching Schumacher's record, a record which, for so much of my life, for the entirety of my life, I didn't think anyone was even going to get within a sniff, within a slight sniff of 7 championships. Hamilton is now 1 away. But I think it's fair to say, just pure championships alone is not the best way to attack this question, is not the best way to analyse the best of all time. And also, I should throw this out there, it's impossible to analyse the entirety of Formula 1 history, to compare Fangio, your Ascaris, your Farinas, to the likes of Hamilton, Vettel, Alonso and Raikkonen. There is such a gap between original Formula 1, pure Formula 1 some people will say, and modern day Formula 1. There is such a huge gap. But we're going to give it a go. We will give it a try. So, there's going to be people peed off at the end of this video. That's cool, because if you're new around here, sure, feel free to subscribe. We do this often. But more importantly, these kind of videos, what I love is, okay, it's cool making them, and hopefully you enjoy the rest of the video. But what I really love is the aftermath, the wars that go on in the comments section, because it's true Formula 1 fans passionate about their opinions, and that's what we want to see. So I will join you down there afterwards. And disclaimer, I'm a Grosjean fan. I will not be putting Romain Grosjean in this list. I don't want any bias, so I know he probably should be on this list, but I don't want any bias, so I'm throwing that candidate out the window. Also, Maldonado, he used to drive for Lotus. I'm throwing that out the window. But apart from that, let's crack on. Is Lewis Hamilton the greatest of all time? Looking at his statistics, we'll start with Lewis and then we'll talk about who else can really be considered. Because up to a couple of years ago, even the end of 2013 in the hybrid era, I think Hamilton, although widely regarded as a top driver, I'm not too sure many people would regard him as one of the legends of Formula 1. Only, what are we now? 7 years on from leaving McLaren. That has changed massively, and the hybrid era has really defined Hamilton's career. He has won every single season in the hybrid era, bar 2016, which, to be honest with you, that and 2011 were the only 2 seasons which didn't go his way. They were the only 2 seasons in his entire Formula 1 career where he didn't beat his teammate. Yes, that's a crazy statistic, but there it is. He's the only driver, I'll just throw some statistics at you for the moment. He's the only driver in Formula 1 history to win a race in every single season he's been in. That's pretty naughty. I rate that statistic very highly. In his first year, his rookie year, he lost out to the championship by 1 single point over Kimi Raikkonen. His teammate Fernando Alonso, 2-time world champion Fernando Alonso, he finished on equal points, but thanks to countback, finished 2nd overall in the championship. Technically a place in front of Alonso, but hey, to be level with Alonso, 1 point behind Kimi Raikkonen in your first year, That's a statement of intent. Went on to win the thing the following year. Got 4 wins in his first year, 5 wins in his second year. However, for the rest of his McLaren career, never finished in the top 3 in a season again. Despite, for the majority of 2012, I would say, McLaren on pure pace had one of the better cars, but reliability was never quite there, that consistency was never quite there. 2009, they had an absolute dog of a car, dreadful. Heikki Kovalainen was his teammate. Hamilton finished 5th, Kovalainen finished 12th in the standings. Only 2 wins for Hamilton in that season. Wasn't his worst season in Formula 1 in terms of wins, but 2 wins. Not a brilliant year. 2010 was in the title hunt right down to the final race of the year. So it was close for him, but never quite materialised. 3 wins in 2010. 3 wins in 2011. However, Jenson Button finished comfortably in front of him in the standings. A whopping 43 points in front. Not Hamilton's best year. Then 2012, that final year with McLaren. Again, never quite materialised. That McLaren car was good, but the reliability, issues on track with other drivers, Maldonado, Massa, had that crash with Hulkenberg in Brazil, the final race of the year, just never went his way in 2012. Then Niki Lauda came along. Niki being Niki, convinced Hamilton to take a big risk at the time, despite the fact, in hindsight, it was a brilliant move. Convinced Hamilton, the boy wonder at McLaren, convinced him to move to Mercedes. And at the time, I still remember vividly coming home from school with my little lunchbox. No, wasn't that young. However, coming home from school and my parents telling me the news, and I'm thinking, my God, this man is ballsy. He's more ballsy than I ever thought. 2013 wasn't his best year. It was his, I suppose, least successful year in terms of victories. Only 1 victory that season. Even his teammate Nico Rosberg got 2 victories. Came in Hungary, Hamilton's only victory. However, he did finish ahead of Rosberg in the standings, and it was definitely a transition year into the hybrid period. 2014, he's won every year since, except 2016, of course. 11 wins in 2014, his most successful year in terms of victories. 67 points ahead of Nico Rosberg in the standings. However, that statistic is a little bit jarred thanks to the double points in the final race of the season and Nico Rosberg having a technical issue in that race, so scored no points. So there's a little bit of an unfair statistic on Nico's behalf there. However, that was the case on the day, and 67 points is a mighty gap. 2015, 10 race wins for Lewis Hamilton, comfortably again ahead of Nico Rosberg. 59 points this time, arguably a more impressive feat considering there wasn't the double points in the final race of the season. But then came 2016, a year where Hamilton almost won the championship. It went right down to the wire, missed out by 5 points. However, his arch enemy, his biggest rival in his Formula 1 career, Nico Rosberg, beat him by 5 points. An awesome race, an awesome showdown in Abu Dhabi, but it was a season, a divisive season. Hamilton with 10 wins, Daniel Ricciardo with 1, Max Verstappen with 1, and the rest went to Nico Rosberg. It was another year of domination for Mercedes. However, Rosberg just had that little bit more consistency, not only in the races, down to reliability especially. We all know those scenes in Malaysia really did swing this championship. However, early on, qualifying, Hamilton made several little mistakes. Austria and Germany were 2 big mistakes which cost Hamilton a heap of points. However, in the early races of the season, whilst Hamilton was having little grid penalties here and there, Rosberg was winning, won the first 5 races all in a row, went to Spain. We all know what happened Spain 2016. And if you don't, first of all, look it up on YouTube. Second of all, big crash. Spoilers, big crash between Rosberg and Hamilton. There was a lot of argy-bargying between their time together. However, at the end of the year, Rosberg champion, Rosberg retires. I think that was probably more of a shocker than finding out Hamilton was moving to Mercedes. Hamilton brings shocking news with him, I'll give him that. So who fills Rosberg's place? It's Valtteri Bottas. And in his first year, Bottas finishes third. Hamilton comfortably wins the championship. His closest rival is Sebastian Vettel, which, considering Vettel had been the man picking up the championships while Hamilton was at McLaren, that really was the start of this fight for five, this brilliant narrative. Hamilton finishing 58 points ahead of Valtteri Bottas. 2018 last season, Hamilton 11 victories, his joint best in his Formula 1 career. Valtteri Bottas down in 5th in the standings. Actually, although Hamilton was first and Valtteri was 5th, the gap between them was very similar. Only 2 points difference. This time Valtteri was 60 points behind Hamilton at the end of the year. However, this season, 2019, bear in mind there's 2 races to go. Hamilton, his 6th world title, currently on 10 victories, despite a pretty lacklustre second half of the season. That first year was insane. Mercedes, 1-2, the longest record for 1-2s on the trot. They have smashed it. Not only have they given Hamilton a fantastic car, Bottas, on paper, looks to have really made big gains towards Lewis Hamilton, winning 4 races so far in 2019. And with 2 races to go, Hamilton, technically, there's still a possibility, this can become his best season of all time in terms of victories, most points, and he could have the biggest gap ever over his teammate. I know, even though it seems like Valtteri's been a big step up this year, currently he's 67 points behind Lewis Hamilton, which will be the biggest gap he's been behind Hamilton, but the biggest gap Hamilton has ever been in front of a teammate. And here I was, thinking that Hamilton maybe had been slowing down a little bit in the second half of 2019. But when I did my research, crikey, I was wrong. The numbers, sometimes they lie, but in this instance, they really don't. Hamilton, 248 races, so in Abu Dhabi this year, we'll celebrate his 250th. 83 wins. That's a rate of 33% win ratio. Third best of all time. 150 podiums. 87 pole positions, the most of any driver. He's second place for the most hat-tricks in Formula 1. That's pole position, fastest lap, and the race win. And he has 5 Grand Slams, second place, joint second place with Michael Schumacher. However, he is comfortably behind Jim Clark, who has a whopping 8 Grand Slams, and 5 to 8 doesn't seem like a fat lot, but to get a Grand Slam in Formula 1, pole position, fastest lap, lead every single race and go on to win the race. It's a difficult one to attain, so 5 is naughty. But, and I can already hear the comments, I've made it this far and I've hardly mentioned it, a lot of Hamilton's success has to go down to Mercedes. And that's something when we look at other drivers in the sport, they had mighty championships, out into team championships, but also cross-team championships. Ferrari versus Williams, McLaren versus Ferrari, Ferrari versus Ferrari in 2019, but even Mercedes versus Ferrari we've seen of late. But even that isn't quite the battles of old. Modern Formula 1, especially in the beginning of the hybrid era, it was Mercedes. It was Hamilton versus Rosberg. Hamilton technically had a 50% chance of winning that season. And that's something you have to consider. The work of James Allison, who's just popped up on screen, Toto Wolff, Ross Brawn, Niki Lauda, all of the crew, even Bono, Hamilton's race engineer. They have been a mighty team in Formula 1. And hey, we've got to put our hands up and respect it. The job they have done is unparalleled. They have the biggest record for most drivers and constructors championships in a row. Valtteri Bottas this year, second place guaranteed. Many would say he's not been as good as he potentially could be. Mercedes are a machine. Hamilton's gamble has paid off. However, what is, I think, is key to all of this, I mean, I've just read out statistics there. People disregard statistics, and that's fine. But what I think Hamilton's been able to do, 9 times out of 10, he wins any duel on the circuit. He is a qualifying master. And even in 2019, it's not been his best year for qualifying. Only 4 pole positions, 10 victories. He's still got it on the Sunday. He knows how to battle. He knows how to scrap the cars. And okay, of late, he said a few perhaps silly comments about racing Max Verstappen and giving him an extra bit of space. But even that comment, which was ripped apart by Verstappen fans, ripped apart by the media, proves he's always thinking, he's aware on the circuit. And I think that's what Hamilton has over some of the other drivers. Sebastian Vettel was one that I probably should mention in this video, considering Sebastian has 4 world championships. We've even seen last year, or the past couple of seasons for Ferrari, this year for Ferrari, there's still chinks in his armour. That perfect season hasn't quite transformed over Vettel's time at Ferrari. There's always a little spin, a little mistake waiting to happen. Hamilton is the king of consistency. But something Jack Nicholls said. Jack Nicholls, if you don't know who he is, he's the Formula E commentator, but he also does Formula 1 commentary for BBC Sport 5 Live. Hamilton is a very clean racer. He's never been involved in major conspiracies. Okay, he has crashed the car. Everyone's crashed the car. Even Grosjean occasionally crashes the car. Very rarely, but occasionally crashes the car. Hey, Spa 2012, that was Hamilton's fault, right? No, jokes aside, there's instance where Hamilton has arguably been fault of a crash. 2016 Spain, however you want to look at that, some say Hamilton 100% his fault. You can look at incidents, I mean, Hamilton and Rosberg had countless encounters making contact. But even a little bit further back, 2012, 2011, Hamilton had a real knack of finding either the front wing or the side pod of Felipe Massa. They had a huge rivalry at the end of Massa's time at Ferrari. Maldonado likewise. Hamilton always found himself in the wall alongside Maldonado. I think this consistency that he's been able to bring in his latter stages of his Formula 1 career, when he's won all of these world titles, has really elevated Hamilton into the, I suppose, into the discussion that could he be, is he the greatest of all time? Yes, we are witnessing history this weekend at the US Grand Prix, but is he the best? Well, I want to leave that there for Hamilton. I've rambled on about Hamilton enough. And of course, I know a lot of people will say, well, Mercedes are that good. Of course, he's going to win all of these championships. If it wasn't for Mercedes, if he'd had stayed at McLaren, he'd be stuck on one forever by the looks of it. But even so, Hamilton, I think, being in the top team, Bottas, what he was able to do at Williams, everyone thought he'd jump into that Mercedes and do a brilliant job, be right there with Hamilton. Now, people don't rate Bottas as high as they once did. Nico Rosberg, when he was beating Michael Schumacher, Christ, that's an awesome feat. People at the time were saying, wow, Rosberg's really got a bit of talent. As soon as Hamilton went into that car, people weren't rating Rosberg quite as highly. I still think Rosberg is a little bit underrated in Formula 1, but hey, Rosberg, is his career over? That's the big question. Good meme is that one. But moving back to Hamilton, he's been able to elevate every time there's been an extra challenge. He's always gone the extra mile, always prevailed. But, as I was just trying to allude to before I interrupted myself, who else is in this conversation? Because to many people, and this is why I'm going to enjoy this video, is that everyone's got a completely different idea of who the best of all time is. Because people have, I mean, first of all, I bang on about this all the time, people watch Formula 1 for different reasons. People like drivers for different reasons. I mean, Kimi Raikkonen, 1 world championship, however, has a personality of an absolute god. Seems like an absolute legend in himself, but also a lovely guy off the track. Just a character in Formula 1. But he's also got speed. And in his early career, very easily, if a few races had gone a little bit different, if he'd have had a little bit more reliability, that 1 world championship becomes 2, becomes 3. He doesn't move to Ferrari, he stays at McLaren, there's 2 more. And very easily, Kimi Raikkonen could be considered one of the greatest of all time. So Formula 1 is such a narrow sport in terms of margins. Very easily, Hamilton, 2008, that championship could have gone to Massa. 2014, that championship could have gone to Rosberg. Very quickly in sport, things can change. So there's a few I want to talk about, and obviously some, and I've got to make this clear, I've not seen most of these drivers drive in Formula 1. So, of course, my view is going to be tainted because I've not witnessed the power of an Ayrton Senna, of a Michael Schumacher on days where they are unbeatable, untouchable. I try my very best to keep up and to look into Formula 1 history. F1 TV, going through the archive, I've absolutely loved doing that in 2019, and I'm going to continue doing that. And that's a big part of why I love Formula 1, is learning all the history. So, this is where I need you. I will go through some drivers in a moment, but in the comments, I need you to tell me who is your number one driver and a little description, and we'll debate it. If anyone puts Grosjean, you'll get an Insta heart. Right, it's only fair we talk about Michael Schumacher, the most titles of anyone. And whilst for someone like me, or even for someone who's just getting into Formula 1 now, you look at the dominance of Michael Schumacher in those Ferrari days. However, Michael's career is almost a bit of a parallel of Lewis's career. Early on in Michael's Benetton days, 2 world championships, awesome. Moved to Ferrari, then a bit of a drought. Okay, Hamilton moved to Mercedes and instantly almost was back to winning ways, but Hamilton won with McLaren, went on a bit of a drought, and then went on an incredible streak now of championships, bar 2016. But Schumacher did a very similar kind of thing. The record books are insane for Michael Schumacher. Although Hamilton, I think it's fair to say, is the greatest of all time in qualifying. Maybe Senna. Maybe all that. Already I'm tripping over. We'll get to that in a moment. We'll get to Senna in a moment. But Hamilton for sure, with the most pole positions, that is his unique ability. He is just incredible over one lap. Schumacher, not so much incredible over one lap. However, was incredible at getting race victories. Incredible of dominating, controlling a race and making it look so easy. I think Schumacher is often overlooked for the greatest of all time by a lot of people for a couple of different reasons. First of all, I think what Hamilton is suffering at the moment is the Schumacher effect, where people disregard their achievements because they have the best car. The Sebastian Vettel effect is a very similar kind of thing. People say Sebastian Vettel only won those 4 world championships because he had the best car. I don't think that was the case in 2010. I don't think that was the case necessarily in 2012 for the entire season. He had a good car, don't get me wrong, but I think sometimes when you look into it a little bit deeper, when you watch the races back, it's a little bit of a different story. Schumacher, however, he did have a very good car in a lot of his seasons. That F2002, what a year that was for Ferrari and Michael Schumacher. You could also say, and this is a big argument with Michael Schumacher, he was the team leader. Now, Hamilton definitely is the team leader now, but when Nico Rosberg was at the team, when Jenson Button was with him at McLaren, was he the team leader then? Of course, Schumacher wasn't always team leader when he first came into Formula 1, but especially in his Ferrari days, he made that team his own. And to many people, the ability to do that, the ability to control a team, make it become the Michael Schumacher team run by Ferrari, that is a very special quality, and that's something you have to consider. Schumacher, as I mentioned earlier, has the same amount of Grand Slams as Lewis Hamilton, both very special drivers, both drivers in modern Formula 1, so I think it's a little bit easier to compare Schumacher and Hamilton, and I think Schumacher, especially to the younger audience, probably didn't do himself much of a favour coming back in 2010, doing those 3 seasons at Mercedes before Hamilton joined. I didn't think it did him much favours. However, I think what it did prove, first of all, that podium in Valencia, but more importantly, even though Schumacher was probably past his prime, past his best, he wasn't in the best car, and yet he still was able to get a subpar Mercedes on pole in Monaco. That proves you've got a bit of skill. Schumacher for sure is in the debate. I mentioned him earlier. Ayrton Senna, widely regarded as the best of all time. I would say the majority of you. I will actually do a poll in the top right hand corner of your screen. You can vote for the best driver of all time. I think he'll win the vote. Senna, his career was cut short tragically by an incident at Imola. And as I said earlier, you can't compare modern Formula 1 to historic Formula 1 because safety has evolved so much. The calendar is so much bigger. Points now are so much different. The whole spectrum of Formula 1 is different. So the truth is, we will never know what Senna would have gone on to do. But what we do know is Senna was a master. I think Senna was the best in the reign of any driver in Formula 1 history. Hamilton is good. Schumacher was good. But Senna was a class above. Qualifying, as I mentioned earlier, Hamilton and Senna, for me, are the two comfortably regarded as the best of all time. 100%. Those two over one lap, rain or shine. Absolute demons, in the words of Jack Nicholls. Senna, though, a little bit like Michael Schumacher, the things holding them back. First of all, Senna, 3 world championships. Again, we will never know what he would have gone on to do. What Senna achieved with McLaren, what he achieved in his very first race in Monaco proves he is a special driver. Any driver that can be on the podium, that can win, that can even just stay out of the barriers in Monaco is a special driver. But what holds Schumacher back, what holds Senna back, is those moments of aggression. And I do believe modern sport and modern media, if Hamilton did some of the things Schumacher did, if Hamilton did some of the things Senna did, he would be out of Formula 1 instantly. And that's nothing against Schumacher or Senna. That's just the way the world works these days. Schumacher gained a reputation for being a little bit naughty, to put it lightly, crashing into Damon Hill, saving himself from losing the championship, crashing in to Jacques Villeneuve. On that occasion, handed Villeneuve the championship on a plate. Famously, infamously, Monaco deliberately crashed into the barrier to cause out a yellow flag. He didn't even crash. That gave him pole position. It was only for pole position. So there were little scars on Schumacher's record, which arguably you could say he didn't even need to do a lot of these things. But yet, such was the nature of Schumacher, the desire to win, which again, for some people, the fact he wanted to win that badly is a huge factor in this. I completely understand that. Senna, his ridiculously toxic relationship, his obsession, and this is the same with Prost, both of them, their obsession to beat each other arguably held both of them back. But also, the fact they were in Formula 1 at the same time, that's ridiculous. I wish I was around to watch Formula 1 back in the 80s, in the 90s. Some of those rivalries, they're too good. They are far too good. And it's something that, hey, Hamilton hasn't really had to deal with necessarily. It's not as if Hamilton and Schumacher were around at the same time. Yes, Hamilton's around along with Vettel. Has Vettel proved over the last few years he's got a championship winning mentality? I don't think so, but at the same time, that Ferrari car's only just getting there to be championship material. Senna, Schumacher, for sure they've got to be in the list. I've mentioned Sebastian Vettel a little bit, so we'll put him into consideration. I'm not too sure Vettel has been consistent enough over his career. His Red Bull career, he was untouchable. Then came Daniel Ricciardo in 2014 and kind of messed that up a little bit. The Ferrari move hasn't paid off just yet. He's still got a bit of time. 4 world championships in the bank. He only needs 2 seasons to be right on the money. Ferrari to be right on the money. And hey, he's 6th world champion. So you shouldn't discount Sebastian Vettel. Other names that, hey, you've got to consider: Jackie Stewart, Stirling Moss, Nelson Piquet Sr., Alan Prost, I've mentioned a few times today. Jack Brabham, for sure he's got to be within the count. Even guys, Stirling Moss didn't win the championship, and I've just mentioned he should be in consideration. Bruce McLaren, okay, he didn't win the championship, he wasn't the best driver. However, what he was able to do, Graham Hill likewise, making and engineering their own team and racing, that's incredible. That is a legendary attribute for a Formula 1 driver to be able to do that. But then you can look back even further. Ascari, Fangio, the godfather of Formula 1, the only driver now to have 5 world titles in Formula 1, the third most of any driver in Formula 1 history. Fangio, 9 hat-tricks in Formula 1, but more impressively, has the highest percentage for wins. Now, Hamilton has the 3rd highest percentage, that's 33. Fangio has a 47% win ratio. That's ridiculous. So, pretty much, we'll round it to 50%. In the 50s, if you went to a Grand Prix, there was a 50% chance, pretty much, that Fangio would win the race, despite the fact there were drivers like Ascari, like Farina, like Mike Hawthorne. Fangio would still have a 50% chance of winning. That's ridiculous. He's definitely got to be within the shout. But there is someone, another driver. I've mentioned him once before in this video, and when I'm ever asked who is the greatest of all time, this is usually the driver I go for. Now, it's not a flashy name like a Hamilton. He doesn't have all the championships like a Schumacher. But Jim Clark had a consistency, had a speed that not many other drivers had in Formula 1. And what he does have in the bank, on the statistics list, the most important statistic, I think even more impressive than any world championship. Maybe. Maybe not, but maybe. Grand Slams. Jim Clark, most Grand Slams of all time. 8 Grand Slams, 3 more than Schumacher, 3 more than Hamilton. Again, pole position, fastest lap, lead every single lap. And considering when Clark was doing this in the 60s, the calibre of drivers, Graham Hill, John Surtees, I'm not too sure about Jackie Stewart, I think that was a little bit later on. But even so, the calibre of drivers that Jim Clark was able to beat, able to dominate in these races. Only 2 world championships. Another driver, which was taken far too soon from us in Formula 1. But what he was able to show, he was brilliant. He was just, some drivers, you just come across them and you think, blimey, they're just a bit too good. You know what I mean? We see that now with the likes of Hamilton, the likes of Schumacher. Hey, even the likes of Max Verstappen. There you are, Orange Army. I'll mention him in this video. He's got the potential, Max Verstappen, to be the best of all time. He's only 21, for crying out loud. But Jim Clark, 11 hat-tricks. That's 3 less than Hamilton. So hat-tricks, not so much, but 8 of those hat-tricks were Grand Slams. So when he was doing bits, he was doing bits. 13 races he led for the entirety of the Grand Prix. 25 race victories, 32 podiums, and yet only 72 race starts. A driver that, as I just mentioned, gone far too soon from Formula 1. But to some people, that element of danger, the fact that he was able to compete in 72 Grand Prix was an incredible achievement throughout that time period. To be able to go as quick as he was and compete in that many races is incredible. Of all the reports, that new Jim said he was a lovely man. The consistency and ability he had to set up a car and race a car was second to none. Of course, I didn't watch Jim Clark race. I didn't watch Schumacher race. I didn't watch Senna race. So why listen to me? That's why I want to know your thoughts in the comments below. That's why I just want to talk to you today. Have a bit of fun. Have a sit back. Have a look back even at Formula 1 and realise, yeah, we're lucky to have this sport. It's not bad. It's pretty unique. It's pretty fun. And we've seen some brilliant drivers. We've seen some outstanding races, some outstanding talents, and yet there's more to come. I understand. Some people won't be happy with this video. There will be multiple things I have said which have peed people off. I get that. That's the nature of the video. But if you can come away from this just thinking, yeah, I enjoyed that. I disagree. I mean, I've kind of said I think Clark's the best of all time, but hey, I look at Hamilton, I think, yeah, he's smashing it at the moment. The consistency he's having is unreal. I look at what Schumacher was able to do at his Ferrari period and think, Christ, that is too good. I look at what Senna was able to do. I look at what Stewart was able to do. I look at all these drivers, and yet none of them in my eyes will ever be quite as good as Romain Grosjean. I will leave you with that. Again, comment below, poll in the top right hand corner, you know the drill. And if you've made it this far listening to me, first of all, you're brave. Second of all, if you're new around here and you've done that, feel free to subscribe. Thank you very much for watching. I really do hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you in the next one.